Now, ethics, okay, don't leave if you're wanting to leave. Some people don't get really excited about ethics, but I do, and I know our guest does. In fact, ethics is profound, deep, I dare to say at later stages of development, sexy and hot.
I wasn't aware of this at all in my years of meditation, like of intensely doing nothing except watching my mind. I wasn't aware of ethics at all. I was abiding in stillness. So I missed a whole educational aspect that was happening out there. But none of that evolution was happening in spirituality. None of the education or looking at behavior was happening. And I'm like, spirituality of all sectors surely could be a guiding principle around how to walk your talk and practice what you preach. What are we doing? How, of all sectors, why are we so far behind?
Yes.
I remember the eureka moment of like, I think differently to other people, and I think it's because of trauma I've been exposed to. I remember it. I was in a pub talking to somebody, in a crowded pub in Ireland. We have a lot of them. We do a lot of standing around in pubs. and I'm just like, I don't see things like that. And got into this conversation with a friend of mine, like, how do you think like that? And then I went, I think like this because I was reared with fear. And I'm pushing constantly against fear.
Yeah.
And my survival strategy is very much up at the top. And I had just about that much language. I'm like, okay, I need to sort out my brain. How do I do that? So I went to therapy. And I knew I had experiences that I needed to process also. There was suffering going on. But suffering did not bring me into the spiritual path. It brought me into therapy. And when I was on the spiritual path, instead of going to my acupuncturist and my psychotherapist and my shiatsu massage therapist, I started taking ayahuasca. I started doing sweat lodges. I went to South America and hung out at a jungle camp in Peru for a while. I went to Bolivia and did the same. Yeah. And so it went more in that direction to find out what makes this woman tick, what formulates and influences her every thought. And yet my spiritual insights, because I had started meditating seriously at that point, my insights were showing me I'm actually not having a thought at all. There's a thought, I don't have any choice at all. Am I here at all? Is any of this real? And these types of questions were hovering around, and I was talking to friends of mine about it, and they were like, you smoke too much weed. Like, no, like you're making no sense at all.
Yeah.
So I had great glimpses for several years, and I had no context. There was no New Age and spirituality section in the bookstore. Google wasn't what it was today. Right. YouTube wasn't there. And you're like, I don't know, but I know this is a movie. And I know I'm making up this whole thing as I go along.
You know this is a movie, you're saying. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And even that this is a movie that's already happened. And this timeline is a bit of, I just think it's this timeline actually. But I can condense all time into this dot and there's no timeline at all. Mm-hmm. So my skills were helping my wisdom to, like the insights I had, to try and make some sense out of it from my human brain. But I knew intuitively that some deeper part of me knew all of this and that my brain was trying to catch up. So there was this sense all the time that my brain is trying to play catch up. And that's still happening. Mm-hmm. And that for me is the evolution. My brain and my conditioning, it will always be playing catch up to some deeper knowing. And the relationship between the two is deeply important to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know? And when you say brain, I mean, the way I'm thinking about that, just to check with you, is like the ordinary mind, right? Yes. The ordinary mind, and then, or our relative reality, and then let's say even stretch to say our ultimate, something more ultimate, whether it's ultimate reality. And that interpenetration between the two is so much of what our awakening process becomes at later stages, at more mature stages we see.
Yes, yeah. Because awakening is for the mind. It's for the ordinary mind to recognize something that's already known within our essence.
Yeah. Okay.
So of course the mind is playing catch up.
Right.
But how these connect to each other is very interesting, because this is what leads us into spiritual bypassing. This is what leads us into misuse of power, you know, because
Yes.
we haven't, you know, I suppose, integrated our humanness with the inner wisdom to where they are actually in a coherent relationship with each other, you know? But that brings me to something else. Yeah.
Yes, which is essential, which is essential. So how did this, I mean, there's, and that's where we're going to go today. We're going to have this conversation about how we do this.
Yeah.
So then what happened? Like, how did you go from there to the ASI and sort of where you are today?
Yeah. My spiritual path became my guiding principle. Looking back, a little bit too much. My human discernment didn't hold a candle to what I felt was being guided from within.
Yeah.
And that landed me in a little bit of stew also. I left my first marriage. I knew I had to go to God alone. That was the phrase I was playing with. I have to go to God alone. And that means actually not being attached to anything. How do I know if I'm attached to my husband or not? The only way I can figure that out is actually by leaving him. That's the only way I can figure it out. I didn't trust myself. You know, I know how the mind can play tricks. I knew it then too. I'm like, nah, I can find all kinds of tricks and hacks to convince myself to keep what I want in place. Let's get rid of the whole lot. Let's throw it all out. And that was very much how I lived. So I spent a few years in India. I spent a lot of time in deep meditation and doing spiritual practice and japa and chanting and
Japa, audience, is recitation. It's like reciting mantra, or
yeah.
you know, that
Yeah.
japa. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and we're both using our hands there and speaking about it, because it's usually with a mala, a set of
Yes.
beads that you're counting 108 or something like this, just to kind of give you a goal and something to do, and you know, a goal to achieve in terms of how many. And 108 is a potent number in many traditions. And so in India, yeah, you know, when you've got nothing else to do except watch your mind all day, it's excruciating. It's excruciating because that's all that was happening. It was just watching my thoughts, and saying, drop it, and go back to stillness.
That's usually when people go back home. You know, this is where I always say it's like where you divide. I'm not going to use, you know, the girls from the women. You know, you either stay or you bail at that point.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so retreaters, I have a bunch of students about to go into long solitary retreat. Remember this, you know, you stay, because it can be very excruciating for sure. Yes.
And the suffering is only breaking up stuff that bound you in the first place.
Yes.
That's all that's going to scream for help, is the part that you would like to dissolve and release. So knowing that, I think, helped me for sure. Is like, the excruciating is my ego, it's identification. There wouldn't be pain. There's no pain in the stillness inside. So where's the pain coming from? Right. It's coming from my body-mind mechanism. It's coming from some old pattern that is resisting and fearful of breaking up and loosening and going to the light.
Yes.
You know? So, a few very big things happened in India. And there was a 2-year period, just over a 2-year period of no thoughts at all. I went into this, I don't know, just stillness. Yeah. And the self-referencing network, I know now what it's called, the self-referencing network, it stopped working. I actually felt it break down. I felt something going on in my head. And I didn't have nighttime dreams, daydreams, thoughts, nothing. I was simply present all the time for a few years.
And were you able to function in that time? Were you able to function in daily life? I was able to
do food and shelter. I wasn't able to have many conversations. I could talk about truth or spirituality, but I didn't know what people were talking about when they were saying, oh, it's a nice day today. I would just nod and go. Because I would be confused by the subjective perception that it's a nice day today. Data attached to weather. Like, I couldn't attach data to things. I was simply present. So it was really complex if somebody said it's a nice day today. It was a log jam. I just didn't have the tools running at the time.
Yeah.
So that's fine if you want to live as a hermit and detach from the rest of, from the world as we know it.
Right.
And that's not most of our callings. Most of us is to, growth is in human life, a regular human life. That's where growth seems to be now as we evolve into this postmodern and where we're going from here era.
Yeah.
And so going back into the world, I was very ethereal for a few years.
I would imagine.
Yeah, I was very ethereal. I remember one friend saying, Jac, I can put my hand through you. I feel like I can put my hand through you. And she wasn't like necessarily on the path at all. She was like, what have you done? What's happened to you in India?
Right.
You're like this. And and somehow that made sense. And I went, there's something off about that. There's something off.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn how to have conversations again. Yeah. Somebody would ask me about myself and I would have to okay, come on, have a thought. Oh yeah, and how are you doing? I literally had lost the functioning. So a friend of mine had called and said, Jac, I have a yoga space, a shala. Would you please come and teach? And I'm like, I can't. Teach what? Like there was no ideas, no goals, nothing. But I said, I'll sit there and see what happens. I'll advertise it. And of course, the teaching started. And I went, there's something really flowing here. Friend of mine made a video of me in India. He just said, I want to interview. I said, I have nothing to say. And he said, can I just put up a camera and ask you a few questions? Sure. And then he took away the reel and made a YouTube channel. And that became my YouTube channel. Teaching started. Now, sure, transmission was high in those days, of course, but I wasn't having any of the carrots of being a spiritual leader. They smelled off to me from the get-go. So I'm like, all right, okay, so what is this around our value system, that transmission is a great thing, that having loads of followers is a great thing. I'm like, why? What does that have to do with your own soul's journey, your own evolution? I couldn't link up how it was a marker. And then as time went by, I noticed that, the ethics that we operate by seems completely at odds sometimes, in alignment other times, but certainly not consistent with teachings. Ethics and teachings are not automatically lining up with each other. What is going on? So now I became interested. So now I'm back in the world and I got married again and and I really started to look at this about 2014. Like, I would have assumed because the role models, the Buddha, Jesus, the Teresa of Avila, the beautiful teachers, like St. Bridget, women, men, whatever way they positioned, ethereal, physical form, they seemed to be good people that I read about. They were the books that were falling onto my lap. But I'm like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Why is that goodness not taken care of as we awaken? And so it led me to present at a conference around, we need to look at this, how awakening and ethics are not in alignment, and we're making an assumption and abuse of power is happening as a result. So there are blind spots in our community of spiritual leadership. And two other people at the same conference had a similar, I tend to kind of sit in questions, and these two were like, this amount of abuse is happening. That kind of amount of abuse is happening. I said, come on, let's have a conversation together. And we started the ASI from that lunch at that conference. We're like, let's do something.
Right. Amazing.
So it grew from there. And it's like, we have to start with a code of ethics and do no harm. That's where we have to start. But always with community consultation, because no one person has any ultimate wisdom. as long as our physical form is here, there are biases and concepts that we have to be accountable for every step of the way. Will there ever be a time when the ordinary mind is completely clear? Not possible. It's an organ. No. It will always have tricks and hacks and blind spots. I don't think, no, I had just my own inner knowing is it's not possible, actually, while the physical form is alive, to be completely clear of all blind spots. I've never seen evidence that it's possible.
Beautiful. So that was when the ASI was started from this, and thank you for that. I know there's so much more in the story in there, but I find it's really, really helpful for all of us. We can all find ourselves somewhere in each other's stories of becoming and awakening. Yeah. So from this place, you were looking around and you were seeing ethics as a missing piece. Is that right?
Yes.
And in spiritual teachers and leaders and communities that you were exposed to? Okay.
That's right. Like of all sectors, I can understand, financial abuse happening in a financial sector. I can understand, lack of education and guidelines in a school to where the teachers, in our day, you'd get whacked across the knuckles by a teacher or something,
Right.
And I can understand that. And over time, they went, actually, this kind of physical touching from between teacher and student is not appropriate. But none of that evolution was happening in spirituality.
Yeah.
None of the education or looking at behavior was happening. And I'm like, spirituality of all sectors surely could be a guiding principle around how to walk your talk and practice what you preach.
Right.
What are we doing? How, of all sectors, why are we so far behind?
Yes.
And my own conclusion is, it's like I wasn't aware of this at all in my years of meditation, like of intensely doing nothing except watching my mind. I wasn't aware of ethics at all. I was abiding in stillness. So I missed a whole educational aspect that was happening out there. And I looked at codes of ethics in industry, just to how are they structured? How are we going to do this? And found none is appropriate for spiritual leaders. We have way too much power that is not ours. The concept of surrendering to your spiritual teacher is misinterpreted, and autonomy is given over. There's so many spiritual teachings that have been misinterpreted because of our lack of solid grounding in moral and ethical behavior.